Today we're going to discuss about EB-1A. My name is Rahul Reddy. Along with me is my business partner, Ryan Wing. Ryan, what is an EB-1A though? How do we get EB-1A approval? Everybody knows that it's an employment-based immigration. It's the number one category. There is one EB-1A, EB-1B, and EB-1C categories in the EB-1 category. Of course, we're discussing about only EB-1. Can you explain how do people get EB-1A approved?
So what EB-1A is these are I-140 petitions. They're green card petitions for people with extraordinary abilities. And so kind of the easiest way, the way I like to think of it is that what is your, as the alien, what is your area of expertise? How can we show that you're of the top 5, 10% of that field, of that area of expertise? And so the government has 10 ways, 10 different forms of documentation that you can demonstrate, that you can use to demonstrate your qualification for EB-1A. So there's 10, you just need to do 3. And so if you have 3 of these 10, you're, I would say, in a very good position for an EB-1A approval. And for a lot of folks in the Indian community, that's one great way to jump really far ahead in terms of the visa backlog.
And what is, does it require employer to sponsor EB-1A? Like I know that in the EB-2s and EB-3s and also EB-1C and EB-1B, it requires employer to sponsor. Does EB-1A requires employer to sponsor?
It does not. No, EB-1A and EB-2 National Interest Waiver, NIWs, those are the only cases typically that can be self-petitioned. So you do not need an employer whatsoever.
So if I think so, I'm extraordinary. Let's say I'm working for a big company and the company doesn't want to sponsor. Can I come to you and I can file the I-140 application without going to the employer?
Absolutely. So the general idea of these cases is what is it that you've done in the past that has given you this rise to extraordinary ability? And are you going to continue in that area? And if so, the government's going to be happy to grant you a green card.
And is premium processing allowed? Because I heard that EB-1A category is backlogged a lot. Is premium processing for the I-140 allowed?
Absolutely. In the same way that it's available for EB-2 and EB-3.
Now, in the EB-1 category, you said there are 10 items out of which I need to qualify for 3 out of those 10 items. For example, one of it is, they say that high compensation for the job, highly paid for the job. Now, does it mean that if I make $300,000, I am automatically qualified EB-1A?
I wouldn't say automatically, but we've got really strong support on our side to say that you are at least one prong is met, and that's the high salary or remuneration. And so generally what we're going to do is we're going to look at people similarly in your field. What are they being paid? And the government comes out with this data. And if you can show that you're being paid 20, 30, 50, 100% of what is normal, I would say, yeah, we've got a really strong case to make for that salary proves that you're extraordinary.
So in other words, if a cardiologist makes $300,000, that may not be extraordinary. But if it's a software professional makes, that probably might fit into the extraordinary category. That might meet one of the 10 requirements.
And it doesn't have to be a 3-figure salary. Maybe you make $75,000, which is a respectable salary, but people in your profession are maybe only making 25 to 30. So that's double what other people are paying. So it doesn't have to be a huge salary, but compared to the people who you're working around, what are you commanding?
So in other words, a lot of researchers, they only make $30,000. But if I am as a researcher are making $75,000, then probably it hits one of the 10 criteria, so which we still need to meet 2 other criteria. Now, it says that citations, how many citations are required though? How important are citations?
Well, it depends, because you can use them in a few different ways, and we got to kind of talk about what type of citation are we talking about. Is this something that you've written? You were in academia and you were writing these papers. We can do that in maybe a couple different ways, a couple different prongs to hit. But if it's just people are mentioning you in their own writings, we could maybe build that. And so it depends on what kind of citations we're talking about. Generally, we want to look to see that they're quality citations, not necessarily a high quantity of citations.
So even if somebody has like 300 citations, but if the quality is less, maybe, maybe they may fit, maybe not. But if you only have 4 or 5 citations, but they're very high quality, they may still qualify for one of the criteria, those 10 criteria. Um, what should someone do if they're interested in EB-1A category? Do they actually have to, just cite the citations, here is a 300K salary and file it? Or is it better to go, what kind of documentation is required? Do you require recommendation letters?
Recommendation letters are really strong, and they can speak to a number of different things within your petition. One, they typically should be based on whoever's writing it. It should be kind of their personal experience, either with you or with the results of your work. And in doing so, they're speaking to one, your significant impact in the field, but even more so, they're speaking to the fact that you've risen to the level that sort of these independent people know who you are and they know who the impacts of your work, what it is.
We strongly recommend people at this point of time, if you're considering EB-1A, don't get the recommendation letters at this point of time until you consult a lawyer. Because if you get a recommendation letter and the lawyer wants it differently, you have to reapproach the same authority to give a recommendation letter again, and that may be a lot of strenuous things. So we recommend that consult a lawyer to make sure what you want to achieve, what do you want to achieve in the recommendation letter, and then approach the person or the organization to give the recommendation letter rather than getting the recommendation and then going back to the same authority to change it.
Agree. And just one quick point there is that these letters, there's a lot of language that the government will want to see, kind of buzzwords. And so if you go out and you do your own letter, well, it might be a great letter, but in terms of what the government might want to see, it's just not going to have the value that you might think it otherwise has.
And one of the criterias out of the 10 criterias, of which we need to qualify 3 of those things to become EB-1A approved, though, is judging the work of others. So can you be a little bit more specific on it? What does that mean? I'm just a supervisor of 2 employees. I just write reviews of them. Is that enough? Or what is judging of other work?
Past, I would agree with you. That would have been enough. Forgive me for not being exact on the calendar, but I think it was about 2 weeks ago, maybe 3. The government came out, not with new regulations, but with new guidance on how they want to look at things. And so in the past, we often argued what you mentioned, Rahul. I'm a supervisor level. I'm a boss. I am evaluating, judging the work of others. I think while we still can leverage those arguments, the government's kind of come out and said it needs to be a peer review sort of thing. So it doesn't have to necessarily be academic, but we need to see someone that, we need to see documentation that someone invited you to come in and judge this work. And then we actually need to see documentation that you've judged the work. And so this prong isn't made more difficult. It's just we need to prove this up a little bit more than I think we were required to in the past.
So normally it's not like if I write a review on the Amazon on one of the book, that may not be enough. But if the author has invited me to write a review on it, that probably would have been much better rather than just me writing a review on Amazon on a book.
I agree, yeah.
Does the EB-1A require a doctorate degree, or can we file with Masters in Computer Science?
No, you don't even need a degree, to be frank. Now, while a doctorate might show that you have risen to a certain level of knowledge, and with that, you've built a network and had some experiences, that doesn't mean you have to have a doctorate or any degree to make this a successful case. It's simply put, what's your area of expertise? And using these sort of 10 items, how can we show that you've risen to a high level within that field?
Now, out of those 10 requirements, one of it you must have published professional in the professional journal articles. So is it an absolute requirement, or is it just one of the 10 requirements which we only need to meet 3 and skip this one out?
Just one of the 10, and maybe you have written some stuff and it just hasn't been picked up. There's nothing wrong with going to public relations, PR firms who can elevate your stuff. And I mean, maybe you're paying them a fee to be placing these things somewhere, but the government doesn't have any problem with it at all. And so they simply see, okay, now this guy's work, either he's being spoken about or the work that he's actually written is being published, with these publications with a respectable circulation. And that's really what the government's looking at there.
And does the person need to work in the research field, or it does not have to be in the research field?
Anything. We've done cases for researchers, for guys in computer science, software engineers. I recently did a case for a weightlifting coach. He was a kind of a world or regionally renowned weightlifting coach. So it can be across the board. If you have a field of expertise and people are willing to say you've risen to a high level within that, of course, we have to show at least 3 of these 10. The government doesn't care really what specific field you're in. Now, you and I had talked earlier, Rahul, about this new STEM guidance that the government has come out with. Mm-hmm. And not just one specific reference either. The government kind of across the board really wants to encourage STEM education, not only amongst Americans, but they want to attract that foreign talent that's highly skilled in the STEM. And so one, kind of reading between the lines from the government with a little bit of a wink in their eye, as well as some very explicit things they've put out. They're saying, hey, if you're in a field, we're going to lend you a lot of credibility with your case. So it doesn't mean your case gets easier or green lighted, but they're going to look at your case much more friendly if it's a STEM field than maybe if it's something that's not STEM related. So that's just something to consider.
So if somebody is in a computer related as compared to the weightlifting, which weightlifting is not a STEM field, so they have a higher chance of getting, even if their threshold is a little bit lower than the weightlifting coach.
And because the government wants to attract those highly skilled people, right? It's.
And then we also want to cite an example as a weightlifting coach, which probably, even if the person doesn't have any degree, though, if the person is very good in the weightlifting coach, he will be qualified in the EB-1A. It doesn't have to have a doctorate degree, doesn't have to have a master's degree. In some cases, does not have a degree at all, still qualifies for EB-1A, as long as he has risen to a level of extraordinary ability, and we can prove that thing, then he will get the EB-1 I-140 approved.
In using this guy as just a quick example, we can show an example of 2 different prongs that we could hit, or that we did hit with this case. One, he was training he was training athletes to break world records and win Olympic and medals, important medals. And so we were able to show that he was a recipient of national awards. That doesn't mean you have to train someone to go win the Olympics, but if you're helping, or you yourself are developing things that are winning awards, that's a prong that we can argue. Another is that in his country, this guy was given what's called the Master of Sport Award. And so we call that a membership in an association requiring outstanding achievement from its members. That's another prong that we can hit. So when we talk about this prong, we need to say, okay, what is the award? What are the qualifications that someone has to meet to get this award? And maybe who knows about it? Is this more than just an award from a local town? And so be creative when you're thinking about these things, because it's not just, don't read the lines when you go Google EB-1A, 10 prongs. Be creative when you.
Can you cite some of the examples of the software professionals EB-1A category, Brian? How to document it?
Well, like a lot of guys will win these awards, say for they work for Dell, or they're doing these multinational Siemens or Qualcomm, those companies. They give awards to their very high achievers. So we could argue that those sort of awards are internationally or nationally recognized. Or for software, let's see, a lot of times you will be in a leading or a critical role for your organization. And so if you were a project manager on a huge technology, maybe say an SAP implementation somewhere, you played a leading or critical role for an organization. Now, if it's just, I don't mean to be disrespectful, but if it's just a small company you're doing implementation for, maybe that's not a distinguished organization. But if you're working for the IBMs and the SAPs, or these big multinational companies, and you're leading projects for them, I think you have a really strong case to say that you are a leading or a critical role for these organizations.
And if somebody wants to contact you, how do they contact you to file for EB-1A category?
I think we should have down in descriptions, but if not, you can always access our website, rnlaw.com. There's a button for the consultations. My name is Ryan Wilk, and I'm always happy to talk you through. It kind of helps if you do a little bit of research and see how you might qualify for these 3 of 10 things. So that way, when you send the case to me, we're not just talking in theory. We can actually look at the things that you've done, and I can say yes or no, this is a strong case, or this isn't a strong case. Or rather, if you just call me today and I know nothing about your background, we're pretty much going to have the same conversation that Rahul and I are having today.
We are giving the link at the bottom of this video where you can make an appointment with Ryan. We're also giving the 10 points out of which we need to meet 3 of those requirements. So when you have a consultation with Ryan, what I recommend strongly is to try to give bullet points. Don't give lengthy explanations though. Just give bullet points that why you meet for these requirements, why you think so you should meet the requirement. And be, as Ryan has pointed out, be very aggressive. We're not presenting it to USCIS. You can tell whatever you want. It's not going to hurt you when you speak with Ryan. So I want you to take the bullet points out of those 10 things. What do you think so you are eligible? Why you're eligible? Just some bullet points. And also attach the resume when you make an appointment with Ryan so that he can review it a little bit and do a little bit of research before he speaks with you. In that way, it will be easier. It will be a lot of time-saving thing for him and for you to obtain the EB-1A category. And for those people who want to step towards EB-1A, even though if you're not eligible, if Ryan thinks so that this is not something a feasible case, so he can advise you. If you make a plan from now onwards to 2 to 3 years, if you achieve these targets, so you have higher chances of hitting an EB-1A category. Surprisingly, what we have seen since the time of Biden administration, we're seeing a significant amount of EB-1A approvals as compared to the previous administration. So for those people who have been locked in EB-2 and EB-3, most probably you're not going to get the green card, unfortunately, for most of the people. So you may want to consider into EB-1A category. It doesn't require any sponsorship from an employer. It doesn't require that you need to move out of the country and work outside the country for 1 year to come in. If you are marginally qualified, then you can do one thing. You can always try to obtain towards getting qualification for EB-1A. Now, a couple of things, Ryan, is that if my EB-2 priority date is 2016, and if I'm filing the EB-1A, can I move the priority date from EB-2 to EB-1 category?
Absolutely. Yep.
Oh, I can do that? Okay. Now, another question. If I get an EB-1A denial, of course, there's always chance for it. If I get an EB-1A denial, does my priority date with EB-2 get lost, or my EB-2 is gone, or do I still maintain the EB-2?
That EB-2 is completely untouched. Nothing happens to it whatsoever.
And one other advantage for you guys is that if you file an EB-1A category, if you get denied, for example, the USCIS will give the reasonings for the denial. This is the reason why we don't think so you're qualified for this. This is the reason why you don't think so. You can always build upon that thing, and later on you can refile the EB-1A even after you get the rejection for the first time. So you may want to consider that. We're going to give you the 10 points in the bottom of the video where you need to do the bullet points if you're interested in. Make an appointment with Ryan and tell him why you think sort of those 10 points you may be eligible. And you can attach the resume with it so that he can take a look into it so that it makes easier for him to evaluate. Ryan, anything else you want to speak?
Nothing today, Rahul. I appreciate it.
Thank you very much for tuning, guys.
Thank you.